We're live. This is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, the Legislative Review Committee here in City Hall Conference Room 103. And I'd like to move forward and ask someone for an approval of the Thursday, January 19th minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are moving on to public input, and it's just told we do have public input and someone has some visual to show us. I'm okay with that visual, but we want to stay within the 3 minutes. And I believe we have our timer available. Oh, man, is that available? Yes. Although that'll disappear when we see the handout. Okay. So whoever's speaking, could you, announce your name and address?
Sure. I'm Timmy Conley. I live at 635 Pulaski Street, a few blocks away. So I'm here to speak about the festival zones representing the Wild Rumpus Parade and Spectacle. So the issue of the festival zones for me is part of a larger conversation that revolves around funding of events in Athens, for which myself and other organizers feel we need all the help we can get. So we've done now 2 years of the pilot program, which we had 4 blocks to work with, and what we felt was very beneficial. Learning as we go with the police department, we did things a little bit differently last year. So we determined we couldn't have a parade leave from a festival zone, but in any case, it seemed like it was very successful in other ways, and don't feel like we abused it in any way. In any case, we wanted to look at expanding. There were a couple of reasons for that, or a few reasons. I think for a tourism perspective, it would be great to have more room, and secondly, to include more downtown establishments. I definitely had people that wanted to be a part of it last year and were not able to be because of the limitation of the blocks. And for fundraising purposes, like I mentioned earlier, it would be a great benefit for us to expand on it. So the maps I provided is just to have a look at 2 basic scenarios that would be for the Wild Rumpus. The upper one would encapsulate the entire parade. That would involve 12 city blocks, and what I figure would be 13 access points. I feel like that's something that we certainly could manage from our end. The bottom map is basically the same, but excluding the parade start. So it reduces the amount of city blocks and access points, and then also stays like the 2022 plan where we didn't have the parade leave from a festival zone.
In 30 seconds.
Thank you. Not much more to say about it. We really appreciate you guys taking a look at this. It's, like I said, it's of great benefit to us to be able to expand it if possible. I don't claim to know all the details of this, but appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. All right, is there any other public input? Okay, got our timer there.
I think I introduced myself last time. I'll watch this clock.
Could you introduce yourself again, though, for the public?
Gene Dixon. I live in 802 Hardwood Lake Road in Winterville, and I produce the Athens Twilight. I would like to see the problem I have with the existing festival zones is it's like trying to fit this square peg into a round hole. It does not work effectively to be able to communicate effectively to the attendees or to lay out in a system that really works. I don't know if it's possible, but what I've kind of pushed for over the years, and maybe we can add this to what's existing, would be a way to do kind of a PD type, like a planned development, but a planned event that we have to get approval on from police and everybody else involved. That would help us make that square peg not be a square peg in a round hole. And again, it would have to go through some approval process, but it would certainly make it up, make it a much, for us, it would make it much easier to convey the entry points and exit points, which we're having a hard time with before. We have, in essence, 8 blocks, and we're having a real hard time how to convey that in the middle of a sidewalk where there's a race course going around it. So if there was a way to inject that, where we could, leave what's in place there, but have a system where we can just do a plan development type approach. That makes sense, I hope.
Mhm.
Minute and a half. Can I just stand here?
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
You're making up for last time.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jim. We're going to move on to the discussion here, and I think staff has I guess our goal is to determine elements that would need to be in place to erect a larger zone, or keeping, as we've discussed before, the pilot program in place for further review or a variation of that. And we're going to start with a staff update on this questions and answers and discussion from the last meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Myers. And at the very end of the meeting, I just wanted to summarize kind of what we were supposed to bring back to the LRC, the ordinance with some revisions, and we can bring that up and we can kind of go through it as customary. So we're prepared to do that. A little bit of research on Savannah. I think the police department probably speak to it a little bit more. Signage, and then also just a staff report or summary kind of explaining our stance on why we do not recommend expanding the festival zone. So you all have the summary, staff recommendation. Happy to go through that with y'all if you want to. But do we want to maybe go with the ordinance first, or hold that for the last part? And whichever way you guys want to go, we're happy to do it.
Is there any preference among commissioners?
For the order we take things?
Yeah,
So maybe start off with Savannah.
sure. It's easy.
Chief Daniel, do you want to go over maybe what you learned a little bit from Savannah?
Absolutely. So the handout you have on page 2 will show you a map of the downtown area, more specifically the historic district in downtown Savannah. They currently have a policy, from what I've researched, of this area that's captured by the perimeter, the red square, is an open container area pretty much on a daily basis. And it's not specific to special events or any other unique activities. There are some limitations within that, such as the container. They don't permit cans and bottles. Things have to be in a plastic cup of some kind. But generally everything within that is open container. That being said, I did reach out to them. I haven't heard back specific about anything different they do with special events within that zone or outside that zone. So I haven't heard specifically about that. But that's their general policy for alcohol in the downtown area. Again, it's limited to just that small space, which I say small for Savannah's purposes, but that's larger than our entire downtown area pretty significantly. And I don't really know what their means of, I haven't figured out what their means of enforcing, one side of that line versus the other, how they regulate that, if they regulate it at all in any stringent way. But that's their general policy and an overview.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners on that?
I can just say that my experience in Savannah, the enforcement is before you walk out of the bar, they point to the stack of cups for you to pour whatever you're drinking from their establishment into the plastic cup before you exit. So the only education I saw was from the establishment where you bought it, to make sure you had that container versus a non. But like you say, the street enforcement and the boundary line is not apparent.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be careful that the task before us is to determine elements that would need to be in place to recommend a larger zone. So I don't know how much this gets afield of that task before us, but in my mind, if we had a more Savannah style approach, just 24/7, 365, a lot of the complications around the permitting for special events get simplified in that way. Of course, it opens up a big question mark around like culturally, what's the impact going to be when we're a college town and not the same kind of community that Savannah is in terms of who's frequenting the downtown space. But sounds like whatever direction we're about to go, we're going to be revisiting this again. And in my mind, it would be worth the next time we revisit this, comparing how to continue the approach that we have with festivals to what if we just took an approach more like Savannah with downtown generally, to really understand what those safety concerns are, or if maybe that's just a way to simplify staffing needs, simplify things for the community. I'm tempted to explore the Savannah approach, I guess I should say.
Well, I will say that I thought about that as I drove into town and how our circumstances are different because we are a college town with so many underage students, and was thinking about how busy Clayton Street is already when you drive down it at 11 o'clock at night, and the idea that it would become an open container area seemed pretty risky. Let's put it that way. I'll use that word. That was my gut feeling. Any other thoughts from the commissioners?
I think that's way out of our charge.
Oh, yeah. But for
And I'm not sure that of the other things that we should review, that would come up as a priority for
Right.
open container.
Mhm.
The recommendation from staff that is not ready to make a larger monitored zone, festival zone, to me, I think is a good recommendation at this time. I do understand logistics, and I felt like when a specific special event came and met with staff, that it was sort of like a PD, that you guys worked with what those specifics were, to make sure that we could handle it securely. So I'm good with the recommendation that's coming forward. I did want to ask if do we have a policy that's specific that it needs to be ACCPD that is the security number, and that we aren't allowed to have special events hire private security? Is that part of a policy?
yeah, actually, the second page 3.
Is it in there?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
noticed that for security.
I'll just hold that till we walk through the ordinance, and I'll just wait till we get to that, so maybe we should go to the ordinance.
Is there anything else you all need to discuss before we go to the ordinance?
Well, the signage is going to be part of the ordinance. We were, at the last conversation we were having, we knew that signage could be possibly a challenge, and we might be able to do a better job educating folks before they entered the festival zone. And then that conversation kind of spun into, we'll, have staff look into whether or not it's feasible for us to kind of create the signs ourselves. And we did some of that research, so it's back here. We can talk about it in the ordinance section, or we can talk about it now. It's up to y'all.
Let's just go through the ordinance and
Sounds good.
talk signs when we get to signs.
So I don't think you start making any changes until right there. Can't remember who struck.
Yeah. So the yellow highlight there with the strike through, that was a remnant sort of our old program where we did used to count seats as part of our outdoor cafe areas. With the new policy limiting it to either a 4,000, 2,000 square foot area and a number of patrons, there's really no need to include seating count. So that was just a cleanup edit there.
Can I ask a question? So with the festival zone, is the event planner required to have like liability insurance to cover accidents within that zone? I mean, it's not our responsibility to.
Right, and I can let Angel sort of touch upon that if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, they're required to have liability insurance. And they also sign a waiver of liability. I don't know how well that would hold up, but we have them sign a waiver of liability saying that they're responsible, not ACC Gov. But every event is required to have the same amount of insurance.
Thank you.
So the next highlighted area in yellow, it is essentially a clarification one. As Angel receives applications, there's always been sort of a gray area in the application about the actual fees and how they're applied, if they're applied per day or if they're applied per event, because essentially you do have events that only occupy a morning. You have some events that are 3 days long. We have been applying it to the per event, and we're actually okay continuing that. And so if anything, it's just a matter of making sure that the language in the ordinance just says per event. The costs for the application fees are essentially to cover the administrative side of it. And from our standpoint, the administrative side is whether you have a 1 day event or a 3 day event, you're still going to have to fill out the same application. We're still going to have to do the same review. It doesn't necessarily change on our side administratively from a paperwork standpoint. So we're okay, keeping that as a per event application. Now, should this come up in the future and we have to expand festival zones or something like that from the current size they are, we may have to talk about some of the extra work that has to go into it from an administrative side. And that may affect the fees. But at this point, if the committee chooses to keep them the same size they are, we're okay with keeping the fees the same and essentially saying they're per event. So.
And to clarify, especially for the people who might be watching later, the gray shading is for the ordinance in the past. So those are the changes we made in the past. And the highlighted yellow is kind of what we're going over today. Just
The gray is the pilot.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Better way of saying it. Thank you. That's right.
It's helpful for those of us here as well.
And so then are you suggesting that we go ahead and make sure it's clear that it is per event in here? And then for those of us, like you say, that comes back, it's going to come back to this group. This would be the space we would hone in on.
Yes.
For that. I think I'm glad the per event is good for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're all good with per event.
Yes.
I want to say that the green highlighted areas are from Chief Owner.
This is just, I think, a cleanup of the language that already existed. The intent of this particular section was the purpose of providing security as approved by the chief of police or their designee. And it was just a change from officer for security just to say police officer. And then it did say security officers, and we just changed that to make it a clearer statement for what we felt the previous intent of the particular section was.
I do have a question on that. This is just the language here on that. And that is, on the first one, it says at least one police officer. Oh, for security. See, now there, I was reading that, or security, approved by the chief of police. And that's where, actually, is that the question, the commissioner, right, that you're addressing?
Yeah, I was wondering if it needed to be, I learned that UGA can't come off campus, so it's not like that could be a hiring. But I just felt like if there were private security companies that special events could use, it might be a lesser per hour rate. Does that work in the plan to team up with what would be obviously the league person?
Sure. So one of the critical issues here would be the entry exit points or anything in the roadway that would require stopping and turning around any traffic or traffic direction. That's going to be a critical issue that would require a police officer who has the authority to direct traffic. So somebody standing in the road, while they may do it, drivers aren't necessarily obligated to follow their traffic directions. And so that's really the primary concern with using officers, especially at the entry and exit points where these roadways are blocked off.
Okay. Versus a festival zone entry exit that's within already closed roads. If it wasn't involving vehicular traffic, could it be a security guard versus a,
I guess theoretically, if the commission desires to change the ordinance that way, that's possible, I suppose.
but at this point, it sounds like there is vehicular traffic at the entrance and exits of the festival zone.
Well, anytime we stop traffic coming down a one-way road and we have to route it a different direction, we're gonna have to direct traffic. So at least at those points, now, if you were to expand the zone or anything like that, certainly there'd be larger areas that once traffic is blocked at the outside, the interior blocks wouldn't necessarily have traffic direction to them.
That's what I'm getting at, but we would have to address that specifically, because at this point, it's only ACCPD.
As the ordinance is written currently, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Allison, is your big concern about police versus security or vice versa? Is it primarily around the cost issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that we could also work around the cost in potentially another way.
Okay.
So we good with leaving this like it is then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Forward.
So this was an addition, we felt it would be prudent to have stronger language obligating the sponsors or coordinators of the events to take corrective action during an event. Let's say, one of the issues we've had recently was the signage wasn't working or the locations, and we needed to adjust those things. We felt it would be good to have some stronger language to obligate the sponsors in the middle of the event to make corrective actions if we're struggling to, or security or whoever is struggling to maintain control of entry exit points or something to that effect. And we have a lot of open containers occurring. If we need to make adjustments on the fly, then, that's something that would help improve the safety, the legal side of the event and everything. And so we just recommended some stronger language on that.
Mr. Who?
The purpose of this totally makes sense to me. I'm just curious, language wise, this says event coordinator. Elsewhere, we say the producer of the special event, just from a legal standpoint, do we need to define who we actually mean by the event coordinator in the language of the ordinance itself?
I think it would be ideal to keep the terminology consistent. I don't remember what we said.
So like general requirements.
The sponsor. Show me where.
So like section 3 on the previous page, it says the producer of the special event shall provide, right? And then 4 says the event producer. So we're saying like producer there, and then here we're saying the event coordinator. So if we're referring to the same person or entity, then I would think that we want to
That's a good point.
the same language.
That's a good point. Yep.
Agreed.
As long as we're not using sponsor, because that's confusing.
Event coordinator, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
So just everywhere we've said producer or permittee or whatever, we'll just say event coordinator.
Good catch. Thank you.
And then we should probably say they or designee, I guess. That's another minor grammatical thing.
So in the final section H, I know there's some concern over being able to manage events or permanent events in the future if there were problems with specific events. And the burden it created if you were requiring a conviction of the ordinance or, specifically of this ordinance through the permit holder. And so there was concern about the hurdle that created in order to manage the next iteration of the same event or the same event coordinator in the future. And so the purpose of this language was to try to reduce that burden on behalf of the government to some degree, so that if there was a situation where we had a particular problem with a particular event, then the manager's office will be able to take corrective action moving forward on that a little more easily, as opposed to requiring a conviction, which is a standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal court for what is essentially an administrative issue.
But no, it still says the manager's office retains the authority to deny incorporation of the use of alcohol into a special event for ordinance violation. I mean, wouldn't that indicate that it would have to be found to be an ordinance violation?
Well, I guess the way it's written, that does leave it open as to whether it's suspected, convicted. It doesn't specify that. Maybe that's something should be clarified a little further.
I thought we also wanted to give us some flexibility in, denying someone's permit based off of past performance as well. That's why I kind of thought it was a little bit vague, but maybe I was wrong in thinking about that. And the ordinance violation would be, hey, for past performance, they did not do X, Y, Z, and central services, the police department reports back to us. They didn't put up the signage, for example.
Yeah.
Would that be a violation?
Signs came to mind for me too.
Yeah.
Right.
That was my perspective, but I could be wrong.
So there would be an ordinance violation cited, but it clarifies who would retain the authority to deny, to put in.
Ultimately deny the permit.
Yeah, or 1, 2, and 3.
It would be based off of the recommendation from.
This specifies only just the denial, as it was said in the previous iteration, the denial of the use of alcohol, not necessarily the permit for the event itself. That's all that's specified here, but that can certainly be changed, whatever the, intent of the committee is.
Okay, the use of alcohol.
Yeah, we might need to think about it a little bit more broadly than that.
And how long would they be denied, whatever they're going to be denied?
That's right.
It's
First,
13
second,
months.
third violation, so it depends on if it's their first time or not.
So would we be able to deny that alcohol? Would we be able to do that?
I guess I would look to the county attorney's office
It's like a full year.
on that
I got you.
And so it previously required, the way it was written initially required a conviction on the ordinance
Too many questions in
violation
my head.
for what's effectively an administrative issue. And so you get different burdens of proof and things like that. So I guess
I got it.
the question was, what burden are you creating for
Okay.
the government to safely and effectively run an event in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to some extent up to you all in the sense that if we want to wait for a conviction, then I'm certainly from a due process perspective, that's the safest. However, the problem is that even ordinance violations, which move fairly quickly, could easily take 6 months or more if someone's trying to have a trial and there's continuances and things like that. If you choose to wait until there's a conviction, it makes it hard to respond quickly. Especially with events are planned a year plus in advance.
If the attorney's office is okay with it, I'm okay with leaving it this way. I'm not sure.
But we're just talking about denying them the use of alcohol, not to have the event.
Right.
Dude, it's basically saying, if you didn't help us out, if you weren't respectful in doing what you said for the festival zone, you can't have it with a beer tent next time. We're just saying no beer tent.
You
No
just can't
festival.
They can have a beer garden or anything.
Beer garden.
Alcohol period,
Yep.
which essentially kind of, makes null and void the festival zone. That's the whole purpose
Yeah.
of having the festival zone.
Just real quickly too, there is a distinguishing factor between the denial of potential alcohol sales at a special event. The manager also has the ability to deny the special event in general, whether or not there's alcohol served. So that is in the actual special event ordinance, which is separate from discussion today. So
Which happened for St. Patty's Day Festival because of COVID.
Yeah.
Pretty much right before, yeah.
Attorney
In the, like you say, in the special events.
Correct.
Versus the.
And I was just going to say, if anyone's concerned, there is an appellate process and the person can appeal to the administrative hearing officer. So if they felt like it was denied inappropriately by that violation, it's built in that they can appeal. So that should hopefully give folks more comfort too.
Right. That's on the last.
Yeah. Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, I like the way this is written and given some discretion. Does this also mean if you have either of these scenarios, an event that then is being applied for again, but with a different person as the coordinator, would that still be able to be held liable to this policy? And then kind of separately, but same phenomenon, if you have the same coordinator with a different event title, can they be held responsible? So basically like avoiding the opportunity for someone to be like, it's a different event. So, you know, I gave it a new name. It's not the St. Patrick's Day Festival. It's the Mid-March Festival, you know?
Similar to how
Yeah.
you're speaking to what happens sometimes with the alcohol license.
Exactly, yeah.
We just talked about that. I'm just trying to remember.
I thought I recalled in the old language, although it doesn't show it on our printed version here, but that we had it say and or somewhere in here to be able to apply to the permit holder and or the event. But I don't know if
No, I do remember that.
That's a great point. I think this doesn't actually specify anything about the permit folder. If you go with what's in green and what's been striked out, it simply specifies an ordinance violation generally, and it refers to the special event may be canceled.
so. What if we said for ordinance violations at the previous event and or by the permit holder or something like that? Would that?
Attorney Hines, would you be able to find the legal wording or Assistant Manager Jones to clarify that in the final draft of this?
We can.
We certainly can. And I apologize. I could have sworn it was in here, but I can't find it. So I'm not sure how that
I
happened.
do remember the and/or when we were
Right.
going to the pilot. Yeah. Yes, we can make sure that's in
All
there.
right, great. Do we have any other concerns or questions that one wants to bring up? I have one or two, but I want to go to commissioners first. Commissioner Thornton, is your hand up?
No, I'm just,
Talk through signage.
The one thing that I did anyone else have one? One thing that I brought up in a conversation, Assistant Manager Jones, is there anything in this ordinance that, addressing the a larger event like the Wild Rumpus or Twilight, where you can have a floor block zone? Can that same event also have a beer garden? Do we have anything in there that covers that? So we do. Is there
You have a festival zone and beer gardens.
garden?
What's Twilight?
Garden, right.
One festival zone, but then you can have additional. That's the way I understand it.
Which is what Twilight did do?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't, that hasn't been highlighted.
I think that's part of what we've heard from event organizers has been confusing and probably will continue to be for patrons is what's the difference between a festival zone and a beer garden if you're a regular person walking around Twilight.
Right, but I wasn't aware from our discussions that Twilight had the beer gardens in addition, and that's a different kind of situation. I was thinking that as a workaround, but they've already used that workaround.
And the confusion going from festival zone to beer gardens, I thought at the last meeting we were talking about mitigating that through signage.
Right. Attorney Hines?
If I could bring us back, I found the language and it is in the screen. It's just struck out, so it was confusing. So under violations, we'll just need to pull it back in. But it originally said any special event and affiliated permit holder.
Oh,
So
right.
that was how we were trying to get
That's
this.
very hard to.
Yeah, so
Correct.
because it's highlighted a different color on the original draft, so we just need to work that back in.
Okay, yeah,
And I think it should actually say and or.
And yeah, I agree.
Okay.
okay. I also wanted to, just as a discussion, we're about to take a motion to approve this, to send it on to the commission. We have had two public speakers from major, very important events in the community. We're putting this in and taking it out of the special permit into regular ordinance, are we indicating in our discussions among us that we would be willing to bring this back at a later time to consider some of these other concerns about a larger zone as we have more information gathered? Is that part of so should we be requesting to the mayor to assign this for review in another year to come back and look at that after we've visited all those,
Yeah, and we've done our on-site
yes,
study.
and actually, while I'm at that, and I actually mean this seriously, is if the central services could send the LRC announcements of when these events are happening so that we can try to experience some of them and understand them ourselves.
We can do that.
Yeah, I think that was probably misunderstood by some people that might have been watching, is that the information that we had gotten earlier was not as, we had more questions.
Yeah,
And that, but I do think the expanding,
it's not, expanding the festival zone is not off the
I think,
off the table.
I think that it's just a matter of getting the information and feeling comfortable about, I think we all agree we want to expand because it's a big thing for downtown and other areas. So, whatever the question you were asking, I think I'm agreeing to.
Well, and if as a committee, when this moves forward, and I'm ready to make the motion, is that we explain, one, we wanted to continue the pilot, but I also agree that Jesse's point made was, let's not leave it so ambiguous that it looks like we're going to end festival zones altogether.
That's right.
So we can make it clear as we move forward that we want to revisit it after a full year, no pandemic.
So instead of calling it a pilot, we're going to codify this language.
That's right. That's right.
But that doesn't mean we're done looking at it.
That's right.
When we have more information.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But at this time, I'll make a motion for that we send this updated pilot ordinance, right? This is ordinance section 6512 is what it's turned into. The sale of beer and wine to the full mayor commission. That's my motion.
I second it.
And a second by Commissioner Thornton.
Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I just want to understand your wording here. Is your motion to continue the pilot or to codify this?
This is codifying it.
To codify.
That's what.
But I think you said pilot though.
But,
Well, it's a.
this is called the updated pilot.
Codify the pilot.
So we're on the, right, this is what the pilot looks like, updated in code.
That's right. So, yeah, theoretically, if we put it in code, it's not a pilot anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So you're right.
Yeah. So to
You
codify.
want to change your motion?
So is your motion to codify this ordinance language and then to request that we revisit it in a year?
And I said,
Yes.
we can still revisit it. I've just-
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when we speak on it, and this will get into February agenda, March vote
Yeah.
at this point, right? I guess we can just leave all that updated and pilot information in committee. And then we're just moving forward with this ordinance as updated
Right.
today with the talk.
And there is permanence in it. It will be
Right.
within the
If we
ordinance.
get distracted by other agenda items, we don't have to worry about this running out.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we will, with the assistance of the manager's office, follow up.
The last time we put a fuse on it. So I think we said like a year we're going to come back. So at this point in time, we're not going to say we're going to come back within a year. We're just going to put it in the code. We're going to leave it alone, see how it goes. And then over time, we may come back to it. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Sarah, did you
think,
get that? Did you update my motion?
I got it.
You would.
And thankfully, we also have recording, so I can also.
There we go. All right. And I appreciate what Avita said as far as making sure it doesn't look like we've ended the discussion.
right, I think the sentiment is that it's not just some vague time that we come back in a year or so and review this ordinance.
And I do like the idea of getting schedules of events downtown. So we as a committee, as our leisure, not a
Not a requirement.
not a requirement,
No,
could go.
no, not a requirement. Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Thornton. Do we have any more discussion? Commissioner Poole?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we talked about staffing needs, and I remember that there was this question mark around solid waste specifically. So if I'm recalling correctly from our last meeting, if we were to expand the festival zone, there's concerns around the staffing requirements specifically related to the police department and security. But that leisure services and central services and TPW probably aren't going to see any difference in staffing levels if we expand the size. But there is this question mark around solid waste.
Senator Jansen's right behind you.
Yeah,
Right.
so I wanted to maybe, while we've got her here,
Yeah.
hear what that would be. Because, if the idea is that at some point we do want to consider expanding zones, it sounds like we have to look at the costs and the logistics of security and then potentially maybe this. Is that?
Yes, what we're noticing from the good afternoon, everyone. What we're noticing in solid waste is it's a lot more, these festival zones are a lot more labor intensive from litter pickup. So what we're going to have to start doing is doing kind of what New York City does after a big event. It's more sweeping, blowing, and we don't have a sweeper right now. It might be something that we have to put in the budget in the future. If we're going to expand these zones, we can't put enough trash can or recycling bins to capture all it. You got, like, Twilight was pretty, and Phil knows, I was down there picking up trash as well, and we didn't even have the right enough blowers with us. We didn't dream that there'd be so many zip ties and so much trash. And we put bins there, but you just can't put enough. When you have so many people, they're just dropping stuff. As soon as they're done with it, it's going on the ground, So we were trying to, as quickly as possible, because they need to get the streets open, get all that stuff out. You don't want to, past festivals, we were able to not have to have staff below the streets because we didn't have a lot of people in the streets with cups and, straws and lemons and limes and all this stuff. So it wasn't as big an issue. So our litter techs would come in at like 4 or 5 in the morning and we could handle everything. Well, festivals are changing things for us. What we're noticing is there's stuff in the streets now. And you can't leave it because if it rains, that it's going to go into the storm. If we're still doing our old fashioned way of coming in at 4 or 5 in the morning, you have a heavy rain after twilight, all that stuff's going to go into the storm drains, causing other issues. And that's just not environmentally sustainable practice. We shouldn't be, allowing the rain to wash it down. So what we have noticed is it is more intensive on litter teching these festival zones. So either a street sweeper or contracted, and Stephen, Transportation and Public Works contracts with a street sweeper for one night a week. It's only on Sunday nights, but maybe we have contracts that we can, execute after an event. Maybe that's the way, use a private company instead of having our own equipment. I think that's going to have to be the discussion is we can't get out of the street fast enough, and there's a lot of mess on the street after the big events now that these festival zones are there. Accurate? You were there with me.
Absolutely. So there will be a budgetary impact.
What, or increased fees for the event?
This block.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. This block, Phil was right. It was the Washington Street block for Twilight. It was bad. We had a lot of trash. We had bar owners lending us brooms to help get everything up because I don't think we dreamt that much trash was just going to be dropped by the festival goers. So, and you're not going to be able to change that behavior, y'all. There's no amount of education to change. I mean, I've been in enough. I've been to Savannah enough in the blocks. I've been in New Orleans enough. I've been to New York enough. They have a lot more money for education than we do. We're not going to change the behavior of the people inside these zones. So we're going to have to actually just be able to pick it up after they're out. And so this is how big cities, Savannah handles it the same way. They have more litter techs. They got sweepers. We're just now entering a time that our individuals with backpack blowers aren't going to be enough after some of these big events. As soon as the event is over, we're going to have to start cleaning up the roads at that moment, not waiting till 5 in the morning.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
so that to me makes very clear that the staff hesitancy around expanding right now is not just about security. Right. It's also about the mess. And I think we've heard pretty clearly from event organizers that they'd really like for us to find a way to expand these zones, and I think they make a pretty compelling case for it. So, I feel like this committee would do well to, with staff from our many departments having a year or so to get through hopefully a more normal year with all these events, more evidence of what it's like using essentially what we've been using for the past year, But then to like put together a recommendation on what it would actually look like to expand, we could have some cost figures associated from the two main affected departments. So-
That's excellent. Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Hool. And
Thanks for thinking of us. Solid waste sometimes, and there's no offense to y'all, but people forget about us.
Yeah.
And that's why I appreciate being asked, because
Yeah,
often we're not seen as much as other folks. And then not heard from.
just like
Because we're not-
water.
Thank you.
So that would be good to put in our minutes to make sure that we come back to when we are meeting on this next, January, and bringing it up for review.
Just a question. What does the university do for tailgating? Do they contract that out or do they?
They contract it out through, they contracted a company in Atlanta runs it, but then it has a lot of local folks. They hire temps usually to come and clean up all that on campus. It's also different. Tailgating areas aren't on streets.
Yeah.
So it's a lot different than.
Yeah, vehicles aren't coming back.
Yeah, but you can take their time. They have till Sunday night to get everything cleaned up. We don't have that luxury. We have Phil here looking at us kind of, like, come on now, get it cleaned up. No, I'm just kidding. He works with us, but yeah, we're under a crunch time. They have luxury of time.
And on this additional educational topic, it would be good for us as a committee to also see what she's talking about towards the end.
Come and help us clean up. Come and help us clean up.
I don't know about let her pick up, but, I would typically not be out at that point, but, it would be beneficial for us as a committee to see,
Yes.
to see exactly what you're talking about.
Keep that on our calendars. Commissioner Hool.
And then, just also wanting to think through the way that we can tackle this problem. One way is to find a way to pay for more people to do the work, but another way is to get a plan in place for event organizers to maybe coordinate a large-scale volunteer effort to help with the cleanup. So, if we don't put further cost burden on event organizers while expanding the zone, obviously in coordination with solid waste so that they're actually doing it effectively and efficiently, but maybe there's a way that we can solve the problem without having to add many thousands of dollars in
Right.
costs to the events.
Another good point. Okay, we ready to vote?
Commissioner Myers, real
Yes.
quick though, could we make sure our direction is correct on the signage? I know at the last meeting, we were kind of talking about what we could or could not do with in-house. I'll turn it over to Director Hassmer here to kind of talk through signage and what we're thinking about.
Sure. I don't think it will affect the motion that's on the floor. The language for required signage is already in the ordinance as it's written. And we're not proposing necessarily any changes to that, but the committee did ask us to look at what it would cost and what the possibility is for us to produce the signs from a government standpoint and lend them out to each event in hopes of reusing them. And then that way we know what we're giving them meets the ordinance in terms of the letter size as well as the number of signs. So Angel worked with our in-house print shop. She got some templates put together and also got an answer on the size of the sign that we could produce from our ACC Gov print shop. Unfortunately, what she's holding up, that is the greatest size that our in-house print shop can produce. That does not meet the ordinance in terms of the letters having to be 3 inches large. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do it in-house. We will have to contract with an outside vendor, print shop, whoever that may be, to buy, a dozen or 2 dozen of these signs and essentially blend them out for each event. We don't have an issue doing that. I think the cost ultimately is going to be minimal. We can even build it into the application that if the signs aren't returned, there's sort of a penalty fee that they have to replace the signs. But I don't think any of that affects the motion on the floor. And again, we're happy to do it, especially during this next year, and report back to y'all when you do take this up again, how that sign program is going. So.
So, when will sound you the plan? 36 times at about $35 a piece.
Well, and I would, I'm prepared to keep an eye for that to give you guys some funding, because that would be hotel motel money.
$1,200.
Yeah, so we could cover that so that that's not included in the application fee, only on when you don't bring the sign back.
Correct.
I think that's gonna, being a visual artist, it's gonna give some visual consistency. I think it was appreciate you doing that little test to see what we're asking for, and we don't wanna have 5, 6 of those pieces of paper making up one sign. And then I know that, Athens Blueprint doing like a yard sign on that corrugated plastic is, durable.
Yeah.
And it could be that you can use both sides. However, I mean, I know you guys can figure all that out, but I didn't want the cost of it to roll out.
Sure.
And we'll just keep an eye out for that in the, budget, because that's like a granular sand
Right.
piece in a bucket.
Yeah, very broad.
Of budget. So anyway, but we'll keep an eye out for that.
We appreciate that.
Do we need to include that in the ordinance language on the signage?
I
mean,
think
without it?
that's in-house
Okay.
management. They've got this.
I'm comfortable with us taking on the initiative in-house. If we need to include that in our budget documents this year, we'll certainly do so separately. But I'm more interested in a year from now, if we find out that we went through 7 dozen signs because they weren't returned and we didn't get money back, then we may have to have a discussion about the actual costs that we're incurring. But I think the initial one-time startup costs, that's something reasonable that we can handle.
Yeah, I'm wondering as well, is if in small print at the bottom, it could say ACC ordinance with what it's there, so it shows that it's not an event, but it's a county ordinance.
Sure.
I think that might make it more serious if I saw that.
Sure. Yeah, we can.
So you were also trying to make them sustainable, reusable. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Right.
There are flags places too, flags that work fabrics.
Well, that'll be its own little test.
So that'll be something that we consider if and when we come back, talk about, an additional expansion if we have to. And it may be that we increase the fee if we're seeing, loss of signage.
Yeah.
Right. So there's another way for us to.
Well, if they're bland and pretty straightforward and we don't have logos on it and event names, they're not going to be as attractive to those people who collect events.
I didn't know there was that kind of person out there.
I've heard of them.
All right, so are we ready to vote then? Okay, all in favor of approving this new special events on alcohol use in festival zones and beer gardens, say aye. Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and that passes.
So the motion is basically, is really just to move
Right,
it
to move
forward.
it forward, right, the
To the
motion
full
is
mayor
to move it
commission.
forward to the mayor commission, yes, out of this committee.
Sarah's got this.
Recommend codifying the order.
Right,
Um,
okay,
Chair,
yes,
would you like a second motion requesting the mayor reassign this to committee in approximately a year?
yes, let's have a second motion to do that.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion to ask the mayor to reassign this for review in a year, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Nays? Ayes have it, unanimous, and that passes as well.
And then that'll be included in the agenda report. Please, Sarah, she goes, I've already made the agenda report.
Right,
I haven't actually, but
right.
I will include it.
Okay, well, we did good. We have gone through that in 2 meetings. And at this point, it is 1:55. I just want to identify when our next meeting is and confirm a quorum. And perhaps we could also, since we have so much time here, just review whether or not we want to continue to have our official meeting as we were having last year on the Thursday after our voting. And with the idea being that we were doing that so that any item passed at a meeting would have the opportunity to get into the agenda cycle for the following month. Does that make sense? Instead of it being 2 months before you vote on something at that point, John, because you're here, newer, then we'd be able to vote on it in a couple of weeks later as a whole commission rather than 2 months later.
Yeah, like this one, like, so this
Like this
item in
one.
March, if we meet that next Thursday, any feedback that we got from the full mayor commission, we would have address at the meeting and potentially
Right.
send it back out for another vote.
Okay, so does that mean we want to, I mean, saying that, I mean, this is a weird month because our voting meeting is on the 7th. So we are meeting before that, we want to wait till the Thursday after the voting meeting or the first Thursday? Is there any, from the manager's office, does it make a difference?
I think Attorney Hines might not be able to be at one of the meetings. Are you
As far as scheduling generally,
scheduling? Yeah.
yeah, I can never be on a second Thursday of the month because that's when we have court scheduled every month. So that was the reason and to be clear, when the original LRC chose the first Thursday of the month, that was originally my court, so we switched it to try to avoid the issue with the LRC. And so if we're going to change that, it takes about 2 months for me to reorganize everything with the court.
But the first Thursday is okay?
First Thursday is fine, just second Thursday.
And from our standpoint, we always want the attorney's office with us.
Oh, isn't that cooperative and thoughtful?
First Thursday also gives us more time for something we pass out of committee to get into the agenda cycle more immediately. Whereas second Thursday, sometimes we run into the issue of staff doesn't have time to turn it around.
True, but the first Thursday can sometimes be the free week before the voting meeting for commissioners who are not full-time, even though we haven't had a raise in pay. Any thoughts?
Does that put the next meeting March 2nd?
It does.
Current schedule, yes.
If we could, yeah.
And what is the week before on that?
March 20,
Because we have a lot between now and then,
week before that is February 23rd.
which is the agenda setting meeting?
Same
Yes.
week as the agenda.
The Thursday is the 23rd.
We have a lot at that
And
last
You
month.
can see this month, right?
Yep,
This month.
that's right.
What's wrong with the first Thursday?
Let's go ahead with the first Thursday. If I have a out-of-town issue, I'll rearrange as needed. Or get someone else to chair the meeting. Let's go with the first Thursday. We good with
We're gonna
that?
try to make that a consistent 1 o'clock.
First Thursday.
Yeah, first Thursday, 1 o'clock. First Thursday, 1 o'clock. LRC meeting.
An hour.
An hour, hour and a half. I mean, what's it? You know, I'm good at moving meetings to 1 hour if needed. So,
Okay.
The next topic, do you want to talk about that a little bit, or is that what we want to move into? Because the mayor may also have something else he wants to move into the LRC. I don't know if you've talked to the mayor about.
no, I haven't. I mean, do you want to talk to the
We'll just make sure we have.
LRC about it, or should I talk to the mayor first about it?
Well, if we're going to meet March 2nd,
Mhm.
we would need some time to prep for the topic, which is the animal control ordinance. And really what we're talking about is pet registration.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's
That's big.
it's hefty.
So to make sure we have a quorum,
I know I can't make the 2nd. I'm out of town at a conference.
and then you might not be, where did?
Oh,
let's
no, I'll
jump-
be here. I'll
Oh.
be here this, just in terms of the whole year,
Oh, okay.
you know.
What if we moved it to, what's the Thursday after we vote? What day is that?
The next Thursday is the 9th.
So that would allow us to pick up on anything that came out of,
I will not be available on that day.
Okay.
Actually,
We'll see you when you get back.
I mean, we're past, I think we feel good here about the ordinance we're recommending,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I have a feeling this is not going to be a controversial
It
ordinance.
shouldn't be.
they will trust us. Okay. So, but let's go back to staff having enough time to present a new topic to us by the 2nd. Let's go
Yeah,
back to that.
that's the main thing.
Is a month enough time to get everything?
This topic is not for me, because I was heavily involved in this, and this is something we've already presented before. I think the question is whether Crystal,
Yep.
but I think I can handle it. I mean, and Crystal's, I mean, we can start right now, quite frankly. I know that piece pretty well.
Okay.
And that's pet registration is that detail, huh?
Oh, Luke.
Licensing, the idea of,
Oh, Luke.
rabies licensing and things like that to make sure it's clear.
So we have a canned presentation because Attorney Hines said, we've done this before now, educating the LRC on just kind of from the bottom up. I think that's where we need to start, right?
Right.
And then we can kind of go to some staff recommendations, or actually we would go to what other people are doing,
Okay.
and then what we would recommend.
Now that you said that, I take that back. John probably needs, to be baptized in this, so I changed my thought.
Not being here when we start a new topic.
Yeah.
It will be.
We could meet in April.
Right.
So
That'd be fine with me. Now you're talking, boo.
And
the same
make it a
standard.
2-hour.
I promise you that would work.
Well, what is,
Huh?
we have this one. This is a short month. We don't have that much time. Would it help you all if we moved this and just did it to April?
That'd be fantastic.
Oh my
That'd
God.
be fantastic.
So we have a set schedule of first Thursdays at 1 p.m.
Yeah, right. Still first Thursday at 1.
First, well, tell me the date of the first Thursday of April.
Right, yeah, I don't have my calendar.
April 6th.
6,
Skipping
1
March.
o'clock. And then we'll try to keep that rhythm going.
First.
I'm marking out
April
February,
6th,
I'm marking out March.
And then I can do an extra
And then
practice for
do we get to bring our pets from this meeting?
You do not want me to bring Luke.
Bring our pets to this meeting?
You do not want me to bring Luke.
Bring the rabies tags.
Wasn't there a manager who said that you couldn't have pets in City Hall?
I do recall there being.
Oh.
Okay.
That was a long time ago. Don't worry.
Oh.
All right, so we have a quorum for April 6th, Thursday.
Oh, that's good.
6.
Yeah. All right.
I like it.
I love it.
Thursdays thereafter at 1
Any further discussion on anything? If not, please, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn, Allison.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, you done missed it. I second. You too slow.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Unanimously passed, and see you all here on April 6th.
Thank you.
Thank you.